welcome to Rauta's Underground Trio once again. We had three different releases from the Underground. This time it's all German. Couple of black metal ones, one death metal one. First, alphabetical order, then from worst to best according to my opinion. And as always, feel free to disagree. First, we'll head to the 90s, or 1994, with a band called Cromlech, which you might know as a name from Dark Throne demo days. However, there are plenty of bands with the same name, and it's rather easy to get confused which band is in question. But this one is indeed an old one. However, had a long break and basically did their comeback very much later on. This is of Eels and Eels, an animal-themed black metal. Then we have Leper Colony, very much giving you already indication what we're talking about by the cover and by the band name, death metal. Then, last but not least, and this is totally, in my opinion, a little bit misleading by the name, Nail by Nail. If I had to guess the genre based on the band name itself, I would say probably some hardcore, but no, black metal. Now, let's go from worst to best according to my opinion and talk about the music in question. First, Cromlech of Eels and Eels. This is a little bit tricky. Technically speaking, a one-man band, which is a little bit, in my opinion, still in a demo phase after more than 30 years after the foundation of the band. But maybe it's because the band indeed was pretty much very soon disbanded after the initial formation, and then when it came back, it started to basically all the work from scratch. This is kind of a black metal that sounds so much like, okay, what you do when you're young and all that stuff. You figure out how to play black metal as a teenager, or at least very young age. And then you kind of grasp the basic idea with the production, with the songwriting and all that stuff. So fast forward to this day, I am still saying this sounds like something that could have come out back in the 90s when you're figuring out the first steps with your second wave black metal. And while there is nothing wrong with that, of course, it's still a little bit late to the party, especially now that it's 2025. Basically, this is from the softer side of black metal. Nothing here says extreme, even if we're talking about the production or songwriting, tempo, whatnot. In production sense, this is more like, yeah, you probably did it yourself, not exactly going to a real studio where everybody understands what you're going after. Nothing wrong with that, but if you're not going to go for raw and primitive or very strong and punchy production, you're going to fall in between that stuff. And then you really have to have those really killer songs, which unfortunately this album doesn't have. At some point, this feels like a little bit rocking. At some point, it's a little bit, hey, I want to add something else to it than just black metal. And that's, in my opinion, where this falls between the things that really nail black metal for me. Then again, that being said, never been too much into the softer sense of black metal, so might be one of the reasons why I'm not real big fan of it. Basically, this is the kind of entry-level black metal that is probably cool for those who are not, really accustomed to some Dark Thronian raw end of black metal or Mardukian fast and aggressive stuff, but are still like figuring out, can I really, stand these, raspy vocals and the kind of a riffing which is going definitely to extreme directions, but not there yet. In my opinion, this is really too much on a demo level in terms of being an album release. Meaning it's a little bit on the crossroads, figuring out which way to go, and none of these ideas or elements are really that much, captivating. So a little bit of a hybrid, which doesn't really work for the favor of the band. Not bad, but very lukewarm is in the sense of what's going on around black metal these days. Unfortunately so, but, that's how it is. Leper Colony, then again, is going very much and very honestly so back to the old school days. Metal Archive says this is a black thrash, but with the second album, which we have here, I wouldn't really say so. To me, just, old school death metal with nothing too thrashy. Those of the Morbid is just like, let's go back to the early 90s or maybe even late 80s with the stuff. And that's, I guess, why bands like Death and Obituary are mentioned here with the given band. These guys understand how the importance of proper death metal sound, beat guitars or drums or just the overall sound, as well as the vocals, which are a little bit on the vomiting side of things. And that's, I guess, why Obituary and even Death are mentioned. It's not really your typical pure growly stuff, but just getting out of your system, like where the slime live. No, not so much Morbid Angel, really. I'm just talking about old school death metal, where this kind of goes hard. Now, the downside is, of course, the competition is fierce in old school death metal revival thing, and as such, it's really hard to challenge the classics. Now, if you don't mind the lack of originality as such, and just love old school death metal, Leper Colony is a very, very safe bet for you to check out. Then, in my opinion, best of the pile, maybe by an inch, but still is Nail by Nail. This is almost purely black metal, and it's kind of a captivating with the melodies and all that stuff. And once again, with tempos are nothing too extreme. In that sense, it's kind of coming from the same bracket as the Cromlech. But this is more captivating, more memorable, and there's some good songwriting on this one. There's a little bit death metal in the mix, especially towards the end of the album, but still wouldn't call it death black, just black metal. And because this album is hardly past 30 minutes marker, much like Leper Colony here, it's not just overextending its stay. It's more like nice and compact, and by the time you're finished with it, you might feel inclined to go for another round, which is always a good sign of an interesting album. Now, if there's something that I want to complain about, I mean, there always is, I want to say that once again, the songwriting could be even more memorable. It's totally getting into proper direction, but given that this is his first album by the band, they're already they have figured out what they want to do. So it's not the most aggressive, it's not the most, fastest album on earth, but solid black metal, and in my opinion, that's the reason why this is the best of the pile here. Now, obviously, different strokes for different folks, and you will find links in the description box, so check out the bands you want, and there are the links so you can dig into more information and all that stuff. And as always, if you like it, go buy it. Now go and enjoy.